Hello again, friends, and you are my friends, and welcome back to another Meet the Opposition as we build up to this Sunday's away game, 2 p.m. kickoff to Fulham. That's right, and I'm joined by Kish, a Fulham fan, and the Cottage Tactico on Twitter. Looking forward to getting his thoughts on Fulham, tactics, insights, all of that absolutely beautiful business. Before we get started, don't forget, like, subscribe, and we are partnered with the East Anglian Air Ambulance. Play the EAAA Weekly Lottery. Best way to play is online. Hit the link in our description. That'll take you where you need to get to. Weekly prizes ranging from £50 to £1,000. Players must be aged 18 or over. Please be gamble aware. So Kish, Fulham fan, the Cottage Tactico expert on Twitter. I started by asking Kish, the last defeat for Fulham was November the 23rd, undefeated in 7, 2 of which have been wins, and they've come through a really tough December. What's been the Fulham secret under Silva?
I think that the thing that Marco's brought to the squad is just this sense of that we're always competitive, and that's a really nice place to be when you're playing in a Premier League where everybody's pretty good. There was a time when you'd look at a run of fixtures like Fulham have had, playing Liverpool, playing Arsenal, playing Chelsea, even Brighton. They're a pretty decent team, and you'd think, oh, I'm not sure what's going to come. But actually, we seem to be happier turning up against some of the bigger boys, and a little bit sloppy when we're playing the likes of Southampton at home this season. So, I think Marco gets the boys pretty pumped up for those sorts of games, and it's a really nice place to be, going to watch your football team and know that they're always going to have a game with whoever they're playing against. There's nobody really that you fear anymore. You think, yeah, you've got a chance whoever pitches up, and that's a lovely place to be.
It is, and of course you're the Cottage Tactico, and your tactics are your thing. What tactically under Marco Silva have Fulham done really well so far?
Yes, I think that there's some things for Marco that are fundamental. So Fulham always play in roughly a mid block. They sometimes press a little bit, they sometimes sit off a little bit, but they generally play in that mid block, and they sort of try and balance the two. And regardless of what the formation is or what the patterns of play are, that stays the same. And we seem pretty stable defensively, even if we do drop a clanger every now and then. We'll come to that at some point, I'm sure. And then the key, I guess, facet of our team that everyone's starting to pay attention to is Anthony Robinson at left back, and really pushing him on. And there's been a move in the last couple of games to move from a back 4 to a back 5, which is something Ipswich fans are probably familiar with themselves of late.
Yep, we've done that.
And we're sort of all trying to work out whether that was a temporary thing, because we're lacking some central midfield numbers. We had a few injuries, whether that's something that we're going to stick with longer term. But whether it's the 4 or the 5, he's the outlet at left back, pushing high, using his physicality, trying to hit the box in those half spaces. And it seems like that pattern of play is proving to be effective, because he keeps on delivering assists. Even if he's not having his best game on the ball, he tends to pop up with something at some point.
7 assists so far this season for a left back. We know all about it at Town. Leif Davis has been our primary outlet for a long time. Do you feel the back 5 allows a bit more freedom in the sense of to go and get involved more and not worry less about the defensive side of the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one with Anthony Robinson. We called him Jedi because he loves Star Wars, and that's his nickname. So if you hear me suddenly start talking about Jedi, I haven't lost it. That's Robinson. But the thing with him, by the way, he plays for America, but he definitely sounds like he's from Britain. He's an interesting chap in general, with his magic tricks and his absolutely rapid runs forward for Fulham this season. In some ways, yeah, getting him higher up the pitch is a good thing, because he is a real threat now. I mean, he's sort of the opposite of Leif Davis in that he never had that final ball and that technical quality. He was just a really good athlete and defender, and he sort of added that to his game now. There is a question mark as to whether you want him to receive the ball high against a set defence, or you want him to be the person getting it from A to B and getting us from our defensive third into the final third and surging forwards. I personally prefer him in that latter role, but he's such an effective weapon. I understand the temptation to have him higher up the pitch, particularly when we're lacking those midfield numbers, as we have done recently with Sander Berger out.
You're only 3 points out of 5th. Do you think Fulham have got enough about them to go on and challenge for a European place?
I mean, so I think the story for the fan base this season has sort of been an endless, the European tour is on / the European tour is off, depending on what the results are. So like passports are hastily being taken out of draws, then put back into draws when we drop clangers and concede points. I think that the truth is that we're in the pack that's competitive. Like that part of the Premier League so congested at the moment. You put a few good results together, you fly up the table. You have a few bad ones, you plummet down again. We're in the mix. I think that the question for Fulham is been the same question throughout, really, which is, do we have enough final third quality? Do we have that striker who's going to get you goals when you're struggling 0-0 at home to Southampton? Do you just have somebody who's going to get you over the line and get the points that you need consistently? And both Raul Jimenez and Rodrigo Muniz have had wonderful moments for Fulham this season, but they are moments, and they seem to sort of be a little bit streaky in how they perform. And we perhaps don't have the Liam Delap size presence up front that the side pushing for Europe probably would want. So my instinct is that, as Marco says, a top half finish is on the cards, and anything above that's a bonus. But you can always dream, right?
Oh, absolutely. That is our one thing as a football fan, is to dream. And you mentioned you haven't got that presence up front. Obviously, windows now open. Every fan talking to dreaming is dreaming of what player they can sign. Is that an area do you feel Fulham will be looking to invest in this window, or is that more of a summer project?
I never feel the January window is a wonderful time to get players in, particularly if you're looking for forward quality. I think if you're a striker and you're doing half decently for a club, they're either going to command a massive fee or they're just not going to want to sell. So I think that Fulham probably have to temper their expectations in that regard. I think there will be some business done, not least because out of nowhere, Fulham had an incredibly good injury record and have suddenly found themselves struggling a little bit with a few key players out. Reece Nelson, who almost came to you guys and ended up with us on loan, out injured. Yeah. Sander Berger, another of our signings over the summer, out injured as well, and even Emil Smith-Rowe has been sort of in and out of the team with a few fitness issues. So I think that there will be some movement. There's perhaps going to be some outgoings. There's endless speculation about the future of Andreas Pereira and whether he's going to be headed off back to Brazil or indeed elsewhere in Europe. So I think, Tony Khan is a bit of a wheeler dealer in a fairly modern sense when he's not busy doing his wrestling. So, maybe there'll be a couple of loans. There's some suggestions that we're one of the clubs sniffing around Evan Ferguson up top. But I'll sort of believe it when I see it. And I think this Fulham squad is fairly well balanced. I don't think there's a huge amount that needs to be done.
I raised a smile, then I winced because it was the Reece Nelson derby the last time we played. It was literally the day after the Willie Won't-he always gone to Fulham. And then, of course, Ferguson's another player we've been linked with. Now you're mentioning him as well. And I'm like, I'm getting deja vu. So I'm wincing in that regard. And because our mind's back to that fixture, it was 1-1. I really felt we gave you a great game. But how have Fulham evolved from that point to this point of the football season?
Well, I mean, that was a good game, and from that early Delap goal, and I thought Amari Hutchinson had a really good game. Fulham were quite passive. I thought they sat off Ipswich a bit, which probably wasn't the right move. I think maybe putting a bit more pressure on your back four, and Muric, who was in goal at the time, don't know if he will be at the weekend, would have made more sense. But yeah, Fulham, we've evolved a little bit. We had Adama Traore in the team and playing well. Last time we came up against you guys, he scored. And he's sort of since returned to his sort of impact sub role off the bench. So I think that there's a big sort of question mark as to whether you'll see us in a 5 or a 4, and that slightly changes the way that we play. But a lot of what you see will be quite familiar. It's those wide triangles. It's getting the wing backs forward as much as possible. And I think the one thing that we perhaps struggled with a little bit last time we played you was playing out from the back. We had Calvin Bassey and Issa Diop playing, neither of whom perhaps have that as their biggest strength. They've actually kicked on and done pretty well this season, playing out in the way Marco wants them to. I was going to say that unequivocally, but then Issa Diop also dropped an absolute clanger late on at Bournemouth last week. So I guess it's to be seen whether that back four exists, whether it's those two or whether Anderson is playing in his familiar right centre-back role in a 4, because he does have that passing range and he does have the ability to sort of play through pressure in a way that perhaps the other centre-backs we have don't have. Yeah,
and there's always a couple of battles in a game where it's key, and obviously the primary one is a midfield battle. Who wins that midfield, normally comes out on top of a game. But another battle I'm really looking forward to, Kish, is your two centre-halves and Delap, because Delap has just grown through the footballing season. He bullied the two centre-halves from Chelsea last week. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that battle, and I think that's intriguing and probably pivotal to how we do on Sunday, is how well that battle comes out in our favour or in your favour. The two centre-halves, you mentioned Diop, a clanger, as you put it. How are those two? Can Delap get the better of them, or can they normally handle a fairly physical, although physical strikers Premier League level are rare? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's there's been a trend back towards more traditional number nines. Like we've got less sort of false nine nonsense going on. The bigger lads are doing better, but there aren't many as big and as physical as Liam Delap in the league. So there's levels to this, and he's right up there in terms of just being an absolute handful. I mean, Fulham's defense has probably been a strong point this season. Our underlying defensive numbers are really good in a way that our underlying attacking numbers are sort of average. So they've been defending well as a unit. I think Calvin Bassey, one of the few times I've seen him ragdolled was against Delap at your place earlier this season. And he's usually one who's pretty aggressive, strong, he's quick, and he relishes that kind of battle. So I think he'll be keen to sort of make amends. And of all our centre backs, whether it's 3 of them or 2 of them playing, I'd expect Bassey to play. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. Diop is an interesting one. So West Ham fans sort of were quite happy when they saw the back of Issa Diop to Fulham, and he's been known for making sort of high-profile mistakes. He's actually probably been our best defender this season. He's been really, really good, but then he did make that big mistake last week. So I don't know if you'll see him. The person I think would be a challenge for, or who would be challenged most by Delap is Anderson, who's an absolute Rolls Royce on the ball, but teams have been getting in behind him a bit, which I think Delap's more than capable of doing. And he's not the biggest and most aggressive of our defenders. So I think if I was Kieran McKenna, if Anderson was playing, I'd probably tell Liam Delap to go and stand on him, and let's see if he's as rusty as he's seen the last couple of weeks.
Hold up, halftime. Don't forget, hit the like button, subscribe for all Talking Town content. If you're liking today's show, you'll never want to miss a show. So hit the like, subscribe. Back to the conversation. And you mentioned your defensive numbers being good. Obviously, that last defeat, if I'm right in saying, was against Wolves, 23rd of November. And Town fans will be eyeing that game as it's Wolves and the Saints game, a 0-0 draw, as potentially, if they can do it, why can't we? What was Fulham's downfall? Particularly against Wolves, where obviously you look at it on paper, you've had a great season. Wolves are down the bottom up until recently under a managerial change, and that jumps out of nowhere. What was the downfall?
So the thing with the Wolves game is that I think Fulham were 2-1 down, had sort of not really turned up in the way they should, but was still competitive and pushing to get back into a game. Marco Silva does something that Marco Silva never does, which he makes all 5 subs early. And then we end up having Anderson get injured. So we end up closing out the game with 10 men, still pushing on, and then we get punished, and it ends up being a bit of a hiding. So perhaps the game itself wasn't as devastating as the scoreline, but you've picked up on something that's definitely the case. Fulham seem to struggle against sides that, I don't really like this phrase, but I think it is how fans think sometimes, you'd expect to beat. And I don't think there is anybody you really can expect to beat in the Premier League anymore. I do think that most teams are competitive most weeks, but we seem to get up for those big games, and we seem to be a little bit expectant both in the fan base and on the pitch in some of those other games. The thing that Fulham struggle with more than anything are teams that sit off them. This was the case last year. It was the case this year, that when teams sit off in a low block, Fulham perhaps don't have the answers to break them down. I think Emil Smith-Rowe was meant to be the answer, and the idea is that you get in a player of sort of better technical quality, and they can unpick a defence, and they can get you over the line. He's sort of been a bit hot and cold, and he struggled a bit with his fitness. So I think that some of those teams who've come to the Cottage and said, actually, we're going to keep things fairly tight and we're going to frustrate them, have had a bit of joy. I don't know whether that's the Kieran McKenna playbook of late. You'd be able to tell me more than most, but my instinct is a slightly more progressive manager than that against teams he thinks he can get a result against.
Certainly, yeah. Last Chelsea less so, but particularly Arsenal, we sat off that first 45, gave up to a new stat record in terms of lowest possession. Not a stat you want to be associated with, but it was Arsenal. But yeah, it's not something we're commonly known for under McKenna, is sitting back and allowing teams to press and come at us a little bit. We are often, as you saw against Chelsea, if you managed to see any of the game, the aggressor. We press high. Delap obviously triggers that press, and then we sort of hunt in packs. And that'd be interesting to note if as you've mentioned, 2 teams that sat in, let you have the ball, and then sort of countered on you. But you've got some quality players, and I looked at the stats as I was preparing for it. You've got 3 players all around that top goal scorer. You've got Jimenez, obviously, Iwobi, Wilson. But who's the pick of the bunch? There's 3 players there. I think Jimenez on 6, the others on 5. But who's the pick of the bunch, Kish?
So look, Harry Wilson's in a rich vein of form and just seems to have a knack of scoring goals. But I think Fulham's player of the season I think there are 3 candidates for Fulham's player of the season. Anthony Robinson, who we've already talked about at the back. Sasa Lukic, who basically nobody else. The way to tell if an analyst or a pundit has actually watched Fulham is if they mention Lukic, because he's sort of an unsexy name, but he's probably our best player in terms of controlling the game. Going forward, Alex Iwobi's been the pick of the bunch. Just contributes in every area of the pitch. creates things, gets on the ball a lot, has now added a lot of end product and goal scoring to that as well. He looked a little bit leggy over the Christmas period just because I think he's played a lot of football, but he's probably our best player. And I think that left-hand side that he's been positioned on with Robinson, with Smith Rowe, sometimes going over to that side, that sort of little triangle has been where we've done most of our damage. So I think from your perspective, you can keep Alex Iwobi quiet down your right. You're halfway there. And I know that you've had a few sort of players coming in and out of the team at right back with Twanzebe out. And I'm interested to see how you feel you're looking there at the moment, because that feels like a key area of the pitch to me come the weekend.
Yeah, it does. And I'm glad you mentioned Lukic, because I normally set up our opposition fan for a most underrated player, a player that the pundits don't talk about, an unsexy name. So I'm glad you've mentioned him there, because I think he's done really well for you. And you mentioned our right side. It's been a revolving door since Axel got injured, to be fair. We had Ben Johnson, Harry Clark. We've gone to a back three. In possession, 5 out of it, with Wes Burns playing against Chelsea at right wing back. We're linked with Ben Godfrey today, Fabrizio Romano linking us with Ben Godfrey, who obviously can play that hybrid role of a right-sided centre-half that can do full-back. So it's obviously an area of the pitch the club are looking at, and Axel Twenzabi's miss is huge. It can't be understated. And I always used to say, Kish, left and right back won't get you promoted. I'm very wrong on that. And I held my hands up, because Leif Davis single-handedly got us promoted, and Axel Twenzabi, when he's been in the team this year, has provided so much more than I thought a right back could. So it's a pivotal area for us. And you mentioned your left side, our right side, another key battle of the game. And yeah, I'm obviously wrong on that old-fashioned view of a left back and a right back won't ever get you promoted. But hold my hands up.
I mean, to be fair, your left back does lots of things that left backs don't normally do, to be fair to him. And he's a really good player, and I know that there'll be lots of clubs sniffing around thinking about Leif Davis as a potential signing. And you're in that place that Fulham have been in for a number of seasons, which is, as soon as anyone starts doing good, the praise they get is, oh, will they sign for someone else, which is really frustrating as a fan. You just want to enjoy them and enjoy their output. I mean, the thing for Davis going into this one at the weekend is that Fulham have been playing Kenny Tete at right back, who's been just sort of incredibly tenacious. He's now injured. Timmy Castagna, formerly of Leicester City at Fulham, now has come into the team. Has looked really good going forward in that 5. But if we were to switch back to a 4, obviously his defensive smarts are going to get tested this weekend, I think. And who plays ahead of Davis at the moment? Because there seems to be sort of a slight sort of switch around there. I'm trying to keep track of you guys because I think you play very good football. But who do you expect to be in that tandem partnership down the left for you?
Well, no Town fan will blame you for not knowing, because one of the things some fans on our platform are calling for is consistency. And McKenna so far has made 3 to 5 changes most weeks. And again, that left side it's been less of a revolving door than our right side. But you've had Sammy Smolix fill that role ahead of Davis more times than not. But outside of that, Jack Clark, signed from Sunderland, has featured a number of times, not as a starter, I think only twice as a starter, but you wouldn't really believe he would start. But I say that, and then McKenna will pull an ace out of the hole, and suddenly you'll find Jack Clark playing left wing, and it all changes. That's how it is at Ipswich. You never can try to get a pulse on what McKenna wants to do. But I would average money on Smolix being ahead of Davis, or Nathan Broadhead, who's come back into the team, having impressed of late. But yeah, some fans are calling for consistency. That's one of the reasons why. So they wouldn't blame you for not knowing, off the top of your head who'd be filling that role. As we close, I've got a question from one of our viewers, Josh. He asks on McKenna, actually, funny enough, what are your thoughts on Kieran McKenna and Ipswich Town as a whole?
I mean, I think, like a lot of the Premier League, there's a lot of goodwill for Ipswich Town this season. I think the story of the double promotion is obviously really eye-catching, and a lot of people watched you guys in the Championship and just thought you played really good football and sort of played attacking football without sort of playing the same type of attacking football that every club seems to be copying and pasting at the moment. So I think there's a lot of goodwill there. I mean, there was some really, I think Kieran Maguire, Price of Football chap, did some good numbers in the week about sort of points per pound spent on transfers and wages. And obviously, Ipswich look unbelievable on both fronts. And I think that's a testimony to your coach, who a lot of people rate very highly. And is starting to sort of get some results that perhaps back up that view in the Premier League. So yeah, I mean, I actually did I'm a blogger in my spare time, and I did a blog looking at Ipswich's tactics through the medium of Football Manager 24 last season. So it's been fun watching you guys bring that to the Premier League, and I think seeing the number of players who've been part of your 2 promotion seasons still featuring, still an active part of the squad and an important part of the squad is just really refreshing. So as much as it's a cliche to come on an opposition fan podcast and just say everything is wonderful and we really like you guys, I do genuinely really like Ipswich Town, and I think there's a lot of teams in the league who'd be very happy to see you guys staying up come the end of the season.
Thanks for that. And yeah, funny you mentioned FM24 because obviously it can't be 25 because it hasn't been released. March we're getting that, and I'm a big FM fan, and it does sometimes feel, Kish, like we're living in an FM simulator. Because it's the sort of thing you do on Football Manager. Take over a football club that has been sort of doing circles and going further down the spiral in the football pyramid, and suddenly you bring them back to life and you get promoted back to back, and people say, "Oh, you've restarted that game 400 times." And yeah, it's that sort of simulation that it feels like we're living in sometimes. Like Chelsea 2-0 winners, like, slap me. That's crazy.
I know the feeling.
You know what I mean? Like, exactly. No one thought that was possible. Probably outside of an IB postcode, but those within the IB postcode probably also thought, if they were truthful heading into the game, yeah, it's unlikely. But it's things that sort of back-to-back season. And my biggest praise of McKenna, if anybody ever asks me, what are your thoughts on McKenna now, in terms of will he go on to manage at a top level? Is this a rental for Ipswich because he's going to go on to another Premier League club, etc.? Is this flexibility? So I'm not sure. He's never had adversity in his managerial career. I think that's fair to say. He took over back-to-back promotions. He's had it good for 2 years, and this is his first time where he's been losing more than he's winning, and having to look, really adapt. And he's done that, and that's the biggest positive I can say about like last 2 weeks. No one saw the formation change coming, and people will always say about Company and Burnley, Kish, don't they, that they didn't change quick enough. He's changed, and that's a real positive for a young manager to not have to put ego first, or his philosophy is the only philosophy, etc. Because we all want to play the expansive stuff, right? But you've got to earn the right first.
Yeah, and look, I think that's just hearing. I mean, obviously, Kieran McKenna's highly rated and on the way up in the world of football. I mean, everyone's aware of that. But just a little bit of what you're saying does have hallmarks of our experience under Marco Silva, which is there is an identity. There's a way in which he likes football to be played. There are certain elements to any Fulham team against any opponent which will be familiar. He likes to play the ball out wide. He likes his striker to come back to goal a little bit. He wants to try and create moments to explode into space. Like there are things that are always there, but there isn't that absolute obsession, that sort of Russell Martin, Vincent Kompany, everything has to be done in exactly the same way. Our football in the season we won the championship, and our football the season after, when we I think finished 10th in our first Premier League season under Silva, were very, very different. And that willingness to adapt and do what's best for the team rather than what's best for your brand, I think is really impressive in a manager. I think for Silva, it's almost slightly pragmatic because he's taken a few knocks and he needs to rebuild his reputation, and he's done that wonderfully well. For someone like McKenna, who sort of seems to be heading up in the world, the temptation is to sort of be that ideologue and to be that Vincent Kompany and to put your brand ahead of what your team needs. And it feels like he's not doing that, and there's a lot to be admired there. So yeah, I mean, it feels like you guys are well in with a shout of staying up. And when you think about the resource that's gone in there compared to the teams around you, that's a real achievement.
Score prediction then, Kish, as we close. What do you think the score is going to be Sunday, 2 p.m?
Well, I was quite bullish on this. We recorded the Fulham Focus podcast, where I'm a regular contributor, before the Chelsea game. And I said, I really like Ipswich, but they seem to be struggling a little bit with player quality, even if the performances are pretty decent. They're not getting over the line in games. Then he went and beat Chelsea 2-0 and put a massive spanner in my predictions. Look, I've got to predict a Fulham win, but I think it's going to be very tightly contested. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Fulham win. But you know what? Our record in these sorts of games isn't wonderful. You guys are on a bit of a high. It wouldn't surprise me if I end up with egg all over my face on this one, if I'm being really honest.
And there we go. Absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you again to Kish, the Cottage Tactico expert on Twitter. Head there, check him out. Great content as always. And we are back live post-game. The moment the full-time whistle goes, we'll be live with our match reaction. And we are partnered with Stomach Osteopaths. Give Freddie a call, 01449 613 633. Don't live life in pain. Pick up the phone, give Freddie a call, tell him the Government Talking Town has sent you, and hopefully he can sort you out. But until post-game Fulham, take care of yourselves. God bless. Have a great one. Upper Town. Bye-bye.